Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Flame Entertainment and Sports. Your boy Rob here. Hope everyone's doing good out there. On this week's episode, we're going to be covering episode 2 of Dancing with the Stars, season 34. I'm going to be giving my thoughts on each couple and, reacting to the double elimination we had and expressing my excitement for night 3 next week, which will be TikTok night. And we'll have an appearance by Mirror Ball champion Charlie D'Amelio. Then in the sports world, I give some thoughts on the Dolphins, as I didn't cover them on the podcast last week, so I kind of give a little summary as to how their week 2 game against New England went, and then their week 3 game against Buffalo went. And then I give some thoughts on their upcoming matchup here at home on Monday night against the Jets. But yeah, guys, before we get into all of that, make sure to check us out on social media, on Instagram and TikTok at the flame_ES. Subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And yeah, guys, with all that said, now let's get into the entertainment world as we cover episode 2 of season 34 of Dancing with the Stars. All right, guys, let's start off with some Dancing with the Stars talk, as we'll be recapping episode 2 of season 34. 2 great episodes so far to start this historic season where, Dancing with the Stars is celebrating being on air for 20 years, which of course is an amazing milestone. But yeah, this week I really loved the theme. I thought it was super unique and super cool, and I would love to see it actually going forward, And the theme of the night was one hit wonders. So all the songs were, like the title says, one hit wonders. So all the songs basically are catchy songs that people know of, regardless of whether they came out 10 years ago or 40 years ago. They're all very catchy songs that most people know. And, it was super cool. We finally had our full judging panel back. In week 1, the premiere episode of the season, Carrie Ann unfortunately was sick. So it was just Derek and Bruno. So it's kind of a different dynamic, only having 2, judges in the panel for the first time in the history of the show. And it was the first time in the history of the show that Carrie Ann was not part of an episode. So it was really cool to have Carrie Ann back in the ballroom this week for episode number 2. The night started off with Alex, Earl, and Val. They danced an amazing jive to Mambo number 5, an amazing song, that I think people love and recognize from generation to generation. It's such a great song. And Alex and Val, they had another amazing performance. Alex, I feel like her first dance of the season was already amazing, but this one to me was even better. We saw more timing. We didn't see, we didn't see really many mistakes. She had great facials. I feel like she did exactly what she needed to do, and that goes the same for Val as well. I mean, I think Val's putting Alex in the best, possible position for her to be able to succeed on the ballroom floor. I think this second performance of the season for this couple truly showed why they're a true contender in this competition. I ended up giving Alex and Val an 8. They received 3 sevens. So combining last week's scores and this week's scores, Alex and Val end with a 34 out of 50. I cannot wait to see what they do next week for night 3. By the way, the theme of the night is going to be TikTok night. Obviously, that's where Alex Earl, rose to fame on TikTok. So that's going to be super cool, to see what song, Alex and Val dance to, and what style of dance they're going to have for week 3 of season 34. And it's super cool as well. Before we move on to the second couple of the night here, Charlie D'Amelio, Mirror Ball champion of Dancing with the Stars, she's going to be appearing on episode 3 next week. So make sure to tune in for that one. Obviously it's TikTok night. I already said, like, Alex rose to fame on there. We have Charlie who rose to fame on there. Heidi D'Amelio, Charlie's mom, she was on the show a couple of seasons ago, and she's been in the ballroom the first 2 episodes of season 34. So, it's really cool to see these people who've, like, risen to fame via TikTok, and now to see TikTok have its own night on Dancing with the Stars, I think speaks volumes to, socially and culturally how big and impactful TikTok has been ever since, it came about, a couple of years ago. It's still recently new when you really think about it. So it's just amazing to see the impact overall it's had on pop culture, and I cannot wait to see what Alex and Val do for TikTok night next week on night 3 of season 34. Now we'll move on to the second couple of the night here. So Danielle and Pasha, they dance a cha-cha to Rhythm of the Night, another great song to, add into this one-hit wonder night for Dancing with the Stars. I thought Danielle and Pasha, they truly showed a lot of growth and improvement in comparison to their week 1 dance. Although in week 1, I was blown away actually by Danielle. The one thing that the judges specifically Bruno critiqued her with in week 1 was her shoulders, and he did it again this week. That she has to work on like lowering her shoulders. But overall, I thought this was a great performance by Danielle and Pasha. I thought they had great timing, and that's something I noticed the first 2 dances of the season for Danielle and Pasha. You could tell that Danielle is perfectly on point with the steps and with the rhythm of each song that she's danced to so far, and that she's definitely in tune with the 2 different styles of dance that she's performed already this season. And that's something that really sticks out to me, because the fact that she's been able to be on timing from day one shows me at least that she could really be a dark horse or a contender in this competition, because it shows that she's already on point with the basics from day one. And to me, that's essential in terms of how far couples go on this show. And then one more thing I do want to point out, I feel like we need a little, like some more facials from Danielle. We all know and love that beautiful smile of hers. And but that said, it was still amazing. I still think her facial expressions were good. It kind of, she was a little more serious, more reserved, and it kind of matched the style and the tone of the performance. With that said, I feel like Danielle too. For those of you that don't know, she does have a hamstring injury currently, so I feel like that might have been her maybe worrying about not wanting to hurt her hamstring, but also worrying about like not messing up due to the hamstring injury. So she might have been in her head a little bit. But with that said, even with her, maybe being in her head, I think she still did an incredible job. And you add on the fact that she has a hamstring injury right now, I think Danielle and Pasha, they're only going to get better from here. I gave Danielle and Pasha a 7. They received a 7 from Carrie Ann, and then 2 6s from Bruno and Derek. And when you combine their score from last week and this week, Danielle and Pasha end with a 31 out of 50. Then we move on to our third couple of the night. It was Andy and Emma. They danced a tango to It's Raining Men, another great, one-hit wonder song for Dance with the Stars, episode 2 here. And I thought Andy and Emma, honestly, like not to be personal or nothing, but I feel like Andy and Emma, they've had the 2 overall worst dances of the season. In night 1 and in night 2, I didn't really see much, like anything to really, I didn't really see any areas in improvement. What I really wrote in my notes was that more content is needed. I feel like Emma is really the one doing the majority of the dancing. Not to like criticize, like I said, it's not like personal. I'm not against these people or anything, but I feel like maybe she needs to add in a little more for Andy in terms of like the actual dance, because I feel like he did do some dancing here and there, but I feel like more of it was like Emma kind of dancing around Andy in a way. Like I said it last week and I'll say it again, it kind of reminds me in a way of her partnership last season with Reginald Bell Johnson, even though that's kind of a different case, being that Reginald is much older and not really able to move as much as Andy's able to move. And something I do want to point out before we move on to the next couple with Andy and Emma and their package was kind of interesting to me. I meant to point this out in our recap of the premiere last week, but I forgot to. Something that I didn't really like last week, he got asked by Julianne, after their performance in week 1, oh, why'd you decide to, join the show? And he's like, because of the paycheck. And I understand, I'm sure there's been hundreds of contestants who have been part of this show who are just in it for the money. And at the end of the day, look, it is what it is. If he wanted the money from the show and that's really why he's there, it is what it is. Like, each person has the right to have a motivation or a reason to be part of Dancing with the Stars. But I didn't really like how he came off. I do have to point that out. And then it was interesting in their package this week. They kind of, I don't know, they've kind of made it seem in a way that Andy is really grateful and it's not just about the checks for him. It was kind of interesting to me. It kind of felt like a little PR type of thing so that people kind of like Andy more. And kind of forget that comment from week 1. And who knows, maybe it's nothing to do with PR. Maybe it truly is Andy wanting the audience to know that he truly does, that he's truly grateful to be part of this show. It's not just about the money, but who knows what the truth really is. But at the end of the day, like I said, none of this is like personal. This is a dancing show. Andy's a longtime comedian and actor. He's not a dancer. So at the end of the day, I'm not expecting him to come out here and be a superstar, but I did find that interesting in terms of the package. But yeah, with all that said, I gave Andy and Emma a 4. They received a 6 from Carrie Ann, which very much shocked me. And then they received a 5 from Derek and a 5 from Bruno. So you combine their score from last week and this week, and Andy and Emma finished with a 25 out of 50. Now we move on to the next couple of the night, which to me was one of the most impressive performances of the night. We had Lauren and Brandon. They danced a foxtrot to Love Fool. It was pretty cool. I've mentioned it on my preseason prediction episode, on our premiere recap episode. It's pretty cool to see Lauren because just like me, she's born and raised in Miami. She's Cuban American, and it was really cool. She dedicated this dance to her abuela, to her grandmother, and that was super emotional to hear and super cool that Lauren shared that her and her grandmother used to watch the show when she was a little girl. So the fact that she was able to dedicate a dance to her grandmother and have it being such a what I wrote in my notes to describe this foxtrot between Lauren and Brandon, it was super elegant and classy. Those are really the two main words I would describe this performance as. I feel like both of them just like were completely in sync. You could tell Lauren, like, a lot of people were expecting her to do great going into the show, but honestly, even for me, like where she's at already, like two dances in, I think she's even exceeding my expectations in terms of early season predictions, not overall season, but like early season. I think Lauren is completely like on point. I think her and Brandon, you could tell they have a great partnership. They got along very well. Obviously, Brandon, I feel like to me, he's one of the most underrated pros in the show. I think he does a tremendous job with each of his partners. You look back on some of his past partners, such as Lele Pons and Chandler, and it's just incredible what he's been able to do with them. And now what he's doing so far in only two dances with Lauren. I think this couple is a true contender. I think obviously they showed her on night one, but now come back in night two and have an even better performance is just incredible to see. Shout out to Lauren and Brandon. Cannot wait to see them progress and keep doing their thing. And I gave Lauren and Brandon an 8. They received 3 sevens from the judges. Combining their score from last week and this week, Lauren and Brandon finished with a 34 out of 50. Now we move on to Jordan and Ezra. They performed the Jive to Maniac, an incredible song. And, they started off the season, right? They're the first couple to dance in the premiere last week, and I didn't think it went too well. But at the end of the day, like I kind of said it on our recap last week, I was like, it was the first dance of the season. Ezra is only in his second year as a pro. It's not like last week I was expecting him to just come out and like absolutely kill it. But with that said, I feel like this week I wasn't very much impressed by this Jive by Jordan and Ezra. I felt like it was off timing again. That's something I noticed in week one. And then the main thing that kind of stood out, at least to me, is I feel like there's a little too much in the choreography. I feel like maybe if they cut it down a little bit, it would have been more balanced in a way. I feel like it was kind of all over the place. So I wasn't very impressed by the judges. I mean, by the performance, but the judges were. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the judges' scores is what actually counts, not my scores. So good for Jordan and Ezra. I gave them a 6, but Carrie Ann gave them an 8, which I was absolutely shocked by. But then you kind of look at last season, and Carrie Ann was kind of all over the place and uncharacteristic in terms of her critiquing styles from the previous seasons of the show. And then Bruno and Derek each gave Jordan and Ezra a 7. So combined with their score from last week and this week, Jordan and Ezra finished with a 32 out of 50. Then we move on to a cha-cha by Corey and Jenna. Shout out to Jenna. I wrote this in my notes. She's the GOAT. She's just incredible to watch on screen. And she brings so much joy, so much happiness into the world. She kills it week in and week out. Season in and season out. She does an amazing job as always. Before I get into this couple, actually, shout out to Haley Bills again. I talked about her last week, and this was her second episode as part of the troupe on Dancing with the Stars, and I think Haley Bills shined again along with the rest of the troupe. They did another incredible job. I'm actually like blown away by this troupe so far. The first two episodes of season 34, I think this troupe is making a case for being one of the all-time great troupes in the history of the show, because the 4 of them are just on point. I actually like too that it's only 4 of them. It's not like too much, it's not like a clutter of people all over the ballroom floor. You could actually focus on each of them individually and see what, stands out about each of them. But yeah, once again, shout out to Haley and the rest of the troupe. Keep doing your thing. You guys are doing great stuff out there. And, you're doing amazing. But now to get back into Corey and Jenna. So as I said, they danced a cha-cha to Baby Got Back. Of course, an amazing song. And it was a super entertaining performance. Like I talked about it last week on our premiere recap. Like Corey overall, we all know he's an entertainer. I mean, this guy's been in show business since he was literally a little kid. So starting out away with the Goonies, he's had a long career, in acting and performing, as a musician. And we all know the charisma, the charm, the entertainer that Corey Feldman is. With that said, overall as a dance, I mean, did he do a great job of dancing? Was it a great dance? Not really. But the one thing I will highlight about these two dances by Corey and Jenna, they're pure entertainment. I think Jenna, we got to shout her out and give her a lot of credit. I think she did the most she could do with what she was working with. I mean, she absolutely made this performance a show-stopping performance in terms of the entertainment value. She kind of covered up for certain things maybe that Corey can't do on the dance floor. So I think we gotta shout out Jenna. She did the best she could. She put Corey in the best possible position for him to succeed, and it's not a shock. That's what Jenna always does every single season. With all that said, I gave Corey and Jenna a 5. They received 3 5s from the judges. Combined with their score from last week and this week, they finished with a 24 out of 50. Oh, man. All right, guys, now to move into the next couple of the night, we have Jen and Yan. They dance a quick step to Take on Me, one of my favorite songs. I absolutely love that song. It's amazing. So Jen and Yan, I kind of feel similar to how I felt after watching their first dance of the season. I feel like there wasn't enough dance in the routine. That's kind of what I highlighted in my notes. I felt like there were too many lifts again, although it was kind of confusing because Carrie Ann called out the lift, but then she rewarded them. We'll get into the scoring after, but it was kind of confusing because Carrie Ann's kind of known as the person who always calls out lifts, and then there was many lifts, but then she rewarded them highly, so that was kind of confusing to see. But at the end of the day, good for them. They got a higher score than I expected, Carrie Ann to give them. And yeah, like I said, more dances needed, too many lifts, but with all that said, just like I said after first performance, I feel like this couple, they're really able to nail it down. Jan's able to kind of cut out some of the lifts, add a little more dance content to the routines. I think this couple is a true dark horse. Honestly, I think Jen, she's shown so much potential that I feel like if, let's say they come out next week for TikTok night and they have more dance, more dance content rather than so many lifts, I think Jen could really prove to the world that she's a real deal on the dance floor. I'm so high on this couple because I really see so much potential in Jen. And then with Jan, like I talked about it last week, we got to be a little patient with Jan because he's literally completely brand new to the show. Last week was his first ever dance on the show as a pro. This is his second ever, so he's still learning at the end of the day. So we got to be a little more patient and realistic, but I just see so much potential in this couple, so I'm hoping they're able to work on the little things to improve their chances of becoming a contender rather than just a dark horse at the moment. And then with all that said, before I get into the scores, I wrote that smile. I got to point out Jen Affleck, her smile is just super contagious. She brings so much joy into the world. So, shout out to Jen. I mean, yeah, that smile is crazy. I feel like, yeah, she just brings so much joy. It's it's amazing to see her out here dancing, on our favorite dance show, man. Dancing with the Stars, the best. Now to get into my scores, I gave Jen and Yan a 6. As I said, I was surprised that Carrie Ann scored. She gave him an 8, even though she did call out the lifts, and she always calls out lifts every season. I don't understand that part, but like I said, good for this couple. And then Derek and Bruno each gave this couple a 7. So their overall score combined for the first 2 weeks is 34 out of 50 for Jen and Yan. All right, guys, now we'll move into a very impressive performance. Robert and Whitney, they danced a tango to Move Your Feet. It was another incredible performance for this couple. Think of what they were able to do in their first dance of the season last week, and they absolutely, hit a grand slam. Freaking, I mean, they amazed everyone. Literally, Robert and Whitney once again come out in week 2 and amazed everyone once again. I literally wrote amazing again. Already after two dances, I'm calling this an all-time great duo. Robert is an all-time great contestant in the history of the show. I mean, these two, it's just unbelievable. If you really look at what they've been able to do these first 2 weeks, it's just incredible to imagine what they're gonna continue to do going forward with so many weeks left of the season. It's super exciting to see a couple like this be amazing from the get-go, because it's man, I can't wait for the many more dances this couple has in store for us going forward. I gave Robert and Whitney a 9. I was very impressed by this couple once again. They received an 8 and 2 7s from the judges overall. Combined with the first 2 weeks of scores, they finished with a 37 out of 50. Now let's move on to the next couple, which was Elaine and Alan. They danced a jive to Hey Mickey, the famous cheerleading song. It was another incredible performance by Elaine and Alan. I feel like in week 1, they're one of the most surprising couples. I feel like they very much exceeded expectations in the season premiere, of Dancing with the Stars last week. And ultimately in this dance now in week 2, I feel like they did even better. And with all that said, I put great performance. And then something I do want to mention that really stood out to me specifically for this couple. So I feel like at the beginning, Elaine was a little offbeat, a little off timing. But then thankfully, midway through, she was able to bounce back. And to see someone in just their second dance on Dancing with the Stars being able to bounce back and get back on timing in the middle of the routine, I think speaks volumes to how how great Elaine and Alan can truly be in this competition. I think they're a true dark horse. And one more thing that I want to mention that I wrote on my notes, like I put, she brings lots of joy, and I just feel that in general, Elaine, just like seeing her, she has this like presence that like makes you want to smile. She brings a lot of positivity and good energy into the world. So shout out to Elaine and Alan. Like I said, they've definitely been a pleasant surprise, I feel like, for the majority of the audience, and we can't wait to see what they do going forward. I gave Elaine and Alan a 7. They received 3 sevens from the judges. Their score combined from week 1 and week 2, they finished with a 33 out of 50. Next up, we have Baron and Britt. They danced a samba to Return of the Mac. Incredible song, of course. With that said, Baron and Britt, I would say this dance wasn't really impressive. I feel like a lot more dance content was needed, specifically, for Baron. I didn't really see much in this dance, so I'm kind of, it's kind of gonna be a short description in comparisons to, describing how the other couples, performed on night 2. And yeah, Baron and Britt, I would say in week 1, what I remember specifically is that they started off very slow and off timing, but I felt like Baron was able to pick it up in the middle of the dance. But unfortunately, I feel like this was like a step in the wrong direction this week, and I gave Baron and Britt a 6, and they got 3 6s from the judges. So combined with last week's scores and this week, they end with a 28 out of 50. Now we move on to what I would say was the best performance of the night. And in night 1, this couple arguably had their best performance of the night as well, and that is Whitney and Mark. They've danced a cha-cha to play that funky music. Great song, of course. But yeah, Whitney and Mark, it's just incredible. I wrote on my notes, I put unbelievable times 2, because really, you think of their first dance of the season last week, and it was just unbelievable. I feel like everyone was blown away with that tango they did, and now to see her, see them be able to already be so great at another style of dance, it's just incredible. First off, with that tango, like I said, then this week it was a cha-cha, and it was just incredible. Whitney, she's beautiful. She's, a joy to watch, and she literally looks like a professional, dancer out there. I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about Robert and Whitney. I'm gonna say it here for Whitney and Mark as well. Like I feel like just 2 dances in, they're already an all-time great duo in the history of the show. And Whitney Levis, she's definitely an all-time great contestant. Just 2 dances in, so I cannot wait to see what this couple does going forward. In my opinion, they should be considered the favorites right now for the mirror ball, along with Robert and Whitney, of course. But yeah, this couple just, it's unbelievable. Whitney is just incredible, like I said, to watch, and it's just so impressive how on point she is. And you look at what she's been able to do, right? Like the badass she is on the ballroom and on the ballroom floor, and then you partner her up with Mark Ballas, who's arguably the greatest, right, pro in the history of Dancing with the Stars. And it's just an unbelievable match, right? A match made in heaven, I guess you could call it. And like I said, I can't wait to see what they do going forward, because it's just unbelievable to see what they've done already in their first 2 dances. So just imagine what else they're going to do going forward. And I can't wait for next week to see what they do on TikTok night. Now we move on to another super impressive couple. This arguably been the 3rd best couple, I would say, between night 1 and night 2, and that is Hilaria and Gleb. They performed the tango to What Is Love. And yeah, Hilaria, she's just amazing to watch. She looks like literally a professional dancer. I said it last week, and now I said it again. She literally looks like a pro. And this arguably 2 dances in, I think we could make a strong case that, this is the best partner Gleb's ever had, because it's just unbelievable. And I'm super happy for Gleb. You kind of look at his story within the past year, the past couple months. Obviously, he was partnered up with Brooks Nader last season. They allegedly had a relationship. He allegedly may have cheated on her. And then, just weeks or a week, I think, prior to the cast being announced of this season, it was being reported that Gleb was not going to be asked back. Ultimately, he gets asked back. And I mean, he's probably with the best partner he's had in his long career on Dancing with the Stars. So it's super cool to see Gleb be part of a contending couple. But yeah, Hilaria, just unbelievable. She was completely on point. She did an amazing job. And I think these two just like have such a great chemistry together. They're an amazing couple. And something else I wrote, which is amazing, is improvement. And you think of their debut dance, and it was arguably the best dance of the night, right behind Whitney and Mark and Robert and Whitney. And yeah, the fact that I saw improvement already so early on is just incredible. I gave Hilaria and Gleb a 9. They received 3 sevens from the judges, so their combined score from last week and this week was 35 out of 50. I gave Whitney and Mark a 10 once again. I gave one to them last week, and I did it again. And they received a 7 from Carrie Ann, a 7 from Derek, an 8 from Bruno. And with that said, their score overall combined from last week and this week is a 37 out of 50 tying them at the top of the leaderboard along with Robert and Whitney. So I'm definitely in huge agreement with the two couples tied at the top of the leaderboard for week 1 and week 2, because I mean what these two couples have done so far is just incredible, and all we could do as fans of this show is be excited to see what else they do going forward on their journey this season at Dancing with the Stars. Now we're gonna move on to Dylan and Daniela. They dance a samba to Macarena. And Dylan and Daniela, I feel like they made a huge improvement this week. They're more on timing from start to finish. The rare critique I had last week for this couple in their debut dance on the show is I felt that Dylan was a little off timing at the start of his performance last week. But yeah, I'm happy to say that, they vastly improved specifically within that area. And yeah, Dylan, he just, in these first two performances, he's shown these flashes of greatness, right? Like, I kind of compare it in sports when we see some young players in sports kind of come out of nowhere, or they start their career, and we see like certain games early on, and we're like, wow, or certain moments, and we're like, wow, man, there's really something here. If they're able to put it all together, you never know what could happen. And that's exactly the case here with Dylan and Daniela. Like, I would not be shocked at this point that this couple ends up in the finale at the end of the day, because I just feel Dylan, with the flashes he's shown, and then you pair him up with arguably the greatest coach in Dancing with the Stars history, like I said last week on the podcast. And man, I mean, the sky's the limit for this couple. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see what they do next week on TikTok night. And yeah, I put, great duel, true dark horse. Like, I think they're the ultimate dark horse right now. And then I also put great smiles. I mean, both of them are such likable people that have great charisma to add on to their great dancing ability and partnership out there. I gave Dylan and Daniela a 7. They received 2 7s and a 6 from the judging panel. So combined with their score from last week and this week, Dylan and Daniela end with a 30 out of 50. Now we have our final couple of the night, Scott and Riley. They dance a cha-cha to Blue Dabadi. You might not recognize the title of that song, but trust me, if you look up Blue Dabadi, you'll know exactly the song I'm referring to. It's a legendary song, of course, but yeah. So Scott and Riley, right? This is a couple that in week 1, I feel like they exceeded expectations, at least in my eyes. Not that I thought they were going to be bad, but I didn't necessarily think they were going to be so good from the get-go. And then you look at what they did this week. Specifically, I want to highlight Scott, because I feel like he really took in the critique, right, he received last week from Derek and Bruno, and he put it into his performance this week. And you clearly saw an improved dancer out there just 1 week after his debut dance on the show. And I think a lot of that credit has to go to his incredible partner Riley. I mean, I literally wrote that in my notes, right? I put improvement, like I covered already, but then Riley is incredible. I think, yeah, Riley is just 3 seasons in, and like the impact she has on her partners, and her ability out there, and like just everything she's able to do at such a young age and so early into her Dancing with the Stars career is like overly impressive when you really think about it. How good Riley is, like at such a young age and at such a young point in her career. So yeah, Scott and Riley, I'm super excited now, because seeing the improvement and seeing Scott taking that critique, like I said, into action already 1 week later, speaks volumes to how committed this duo is to competing for the mirror ball this season. And I think you can add them right below, or maybe a spot or two below Dylan and Daniela as a potential dark horse in this competition. Can't wait to see what they do next week in their third dance of the season. I gave Scott and Riley a 7. They received 3 6s from the judges. So overall, their score combined from last week and this week, they finished with a 28 out of 50. And now we have officially covered all the dances that were part of, night 2 of season 34. Now we're going to get into our first elimination of the season, which was a double elimination, being that the premiere episode did not have any couple eliminated. The final commercial break, right before we get our final results for what couples are being eliminated, I wrote down my predictions. I had Andy and Emma, along with Corey and Jenna, being eliminated. I feel like these were the 2 lowest in terms of overall dancing, I guess you could call it, combined with week 1 and week 2. But that said, I did get one couple right, which was Corey and Jenna. They got eliminated, but then the other couple was Baron and Britt, actually, not Andy and Emma. That actually very much shocked me. Again, like when I talk about Andy and Emma, there's nothing personal, but I just feel like Andy and Emma, their first 2 dances have arguably been the worst 2 of the season, along with Corey and Jenna, of course. But with that said, I do understand why Baron and Britt were eliminated, because I feel like Baron and Britt, they're basically the third lowest overall couple so far this season. So I guess they kind of interchange with Baron and Britt and Andy and Emma in a way. But I am expecting now next week for Andy and Emma to go home. unless they have an unbelievable dance, and unless I'm guessing like a lot of fans voted for Andy and Emma for, to keep him in the competition over Baron and Britt. But yeah, like I said, it did shock me that Andy did not go home and Baron actually went home. But like I said, I do understand because Baron and Britt were probably the third lowest couple in terms of overall rankings right now. But yeah, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed, hearing my thoughts on episode 2 of season 34 of Dancing with the Stars. It was another great episode filled with many great performances, some confusing scores like I mentioned early on, and a shocking elimination like I just covered. So yeah, guys, with all that said, if you have any thoughts on this season so far or anything you're looking forward to next week on TikTok night and you want to share it with us, if you're watching here on YouTube, make sure to comment down below. And if not, you could reach out to us and share your thoughts on Dancing with the Stars via TikTok and Instagram at the flame_ES. But yeah, guys, with all that said, hope you guys enjoyed this entertainment portion of the podcast. Now we're gonna move into the sports world as I cover my Miami Dolphins and some other NFL related news. All right, guys, now let's get into the sports world where I'll be giving some thoughts on the Miami Dolphins. I cover the Dolphins a lot on here. But with that said, I didn't cover the Dolphins last week, so I haven't talked about them on here since their week 1 loss to Indianapolis. So ever since that week 1 loss, they came home in week 2. They lost to New England. So to kind of sum up that game, they did show a lot more promise on offense, right? We saw Tua have a much better game. Some of the weapons step up, such as Devon Achane. Tyreek Hill got a little more involved. Malik Washington did a great job. He had a punt return for a touchdown, which was absolutely electric and amazing to see. That's definitely a guy in his second year. He's showing a lot of promise, and the hope is that going forward, he's able to get a little more involved in the offense. But yeah, that game, the defense, as expected, like not surprising to me at all. They did struggle for the majority of the contest. Something about this defense, I feel like people and fans, we got to be a little more realistic. Specifically, when you look at our secondary, the majority of our secondary right now is made up of guys who don't belong in those positions right now. I feel like we're kind of putting them in positions that are not going to help them succeed. And at the end of the day, like, I'm not trying to make excuses for the players, but at the end of the day, we got to be more realistic and kind of look at a different perspective, because we have guys out there who, like, honestly would probably be practice squad guys on other teams when you really look at it. And with that said though, however, in the second half, our defense coordinator, he has to get a lot of credit. Anthony Weaver, he was able to adjust. The defense performed a lot better in the second half, specifically towards the end of the third quarter, and then in the fourth, they really stepped up in that game. And unfortunately, the Dolphins, we had a chance there at the end. In the final drive, the defense gave us the opportunity to have the ball with a lot of time left on the clock to possibly go and do a game-winning drive. We got into a field goal range. Ultimately, we end up losing the game. We weren't able to get plays in on time. We had to call timeouts. We had a delay of game. You look to the sideline and Mike McDaniel's just looking down at his play sheet, not paying attention to the clock. You have people in the stadium screaming at Tua for not, looking at the clock and not getting everyone set up. And at the end of the day, Tua's the quarterback. And I know all you Tua haters, don't worry. I know Tua had a really bad interception in that game. It was very similar to his interception, one of the interceptions he threw against Indianapolis, where he didn't notice the underneath guy, and the underneath guy just came and picked it off. And Tua had another one of those in this game as well, and that was super disappointing to see. Very uncharacteristic of Tua. But yeah, with that said, unfortunately, it's kind of a trend in these 4 years of Mike McDaniel. First of all, the play calling. We always get the plays in like super late from the sidelines. That's something that I've been looking for McDaniel to improve upon, and it hasn't really improved upon. It's kind of the same thing as it was in day 1 of his first year. Unfortunately, too, another thing is that you kind of see a pattern throughout these 4 years of McDaniel. Usually the unit that's not able to come through at the end is the unit that he leads, which is the offensive unit, which also most of the time has had the most talent on the team. When you really look at our defense over these years, our defense hasn't been nearly as talented as the offense had, and usually, or more times than not, our defense is the one stepping up at the end of the game, giving the offense the opportunity to go down and win the field win the game on a game-winning drive. And unfortunately, against New England, we weren't able to come through. Then you move on. We played a Thursday night game in Buffalo, and at least to me, very surprisingly, we were basically in that game the whole time. I kind of feel like we beat ourselves when you really look at it. We were able to score 3 touchdowns. Our defense, I think it was their best performance of the season so far. It was definitely from the start of the game to the end, it was their best performance. A couple of guys I want to really point out. Jack Jones, it was definitely his most impressive game so far in his, Dolphins tenure, 3 games in. It was his best game, I think, because he was more physical than he's been in the previous 2 games. Another guy, Tyrell Dotson, the linebacker, first half he was pretty bad, but in the second half, man, he very much regrouped. He turned it around, got a lot of key tackles, and unfortunately in this game as well, I feel like the defense kept giving the offense opportunity after opportunity. Sorry, I got a little tongue twister there. But yeah, once again, the defense kept giving the offense opportunities. But at the end of the day, you're going against Josh Allen and such a high-powered offense, and also your defense is gonna get tired when you keep you keep punting the ball. And unfortunately, in this game as well against Buffalo, man, like the drives that actually worked were because we committed to the run. That's something McDaniel's been unwilling to do in his tenure. Commit to the run. We actually fed the ball to Ali Gordon in the goal line, something that a lot of fans we've been waiting for. We saw how good Ali was in short yardage there. He was able to score a great touchdown. Look what happens when you commit to the run game, and not just committing to the run game, but when you get to the red zone, you use your big power forward back and you give Achan some rest. Because at the end of the day, look, Achan's going above and beyond in these 3 games. He's been absolutely unbelievable. He's breaking tackles like I've never seen before. But I really don't think that's a long term like sustainable thing for us as a team and for Achan and his career overall. So I'm really hoping McDaniel against this game coming up on Monday night here in Miami against the Jets, that he's more willing to commit to the run game than he's been in the past. So yeah, that kind of sums it up. I didn't want to go super into detail, being that these past 2 games already finished and they're kind of the same thing. And to go back to Tua as well, like I mentioned him in the New England game where he didn't see an underneath man come in and pick it off. Same thing in Indianapolis, and now against Buffalo as well. Unfortunately, in the fourth quarter, we were driving down the field with about 3 minutes left. Same thing happens. He throws a ball, and the underneath man comes out of nowhere. Tua didn't see him again. So that's something very interesting that, it's super uncharacteristic, first of all, Tua, to throw these interceptions that are just like, they don't look super smart, if that makes sense. They're very low IQ interceptions, and that's not something that Tua's ever done in his career. When you really look back at his whole career, going back to Alabama and his first 5 years here in Miami in the NFL. So that's something that I'm hoping that someone's able to help Tua with. Unfortunately, I don't trust all the coaches around him right now. So that's the only thing that's kind of tricky. But I'm hoping someone was able to get into his ear and kind of figure out on tape what he has to do going forward to not keep getting picked off by those underneath guys. So that was unfortunate to see as well for Tua, 3 games in a row with 3 costly interceptions, and not just costly, but like 3 of the exact same interceptions, like type of interceptions. Like I said, like he doesn't see the underneath man in coverage. The underneath guys, I guess, are doing good in terms of like kind of hiding from him, and then Tua's not spotting them. And then I feel it has to do with coaching as well, because I feel like after watching the Indianapolis game in week 1, I wouldn't be shocked if the defensive coaches for New England and then for Buffalo saw that on tape and they're like, oh, we could do the same thing to Tua because he's not noticing the underneath man. So I won't be shocked as well, So it's gonna be interesting to see. Now we play at home, second home game Monday night against the Jets at 7 p.m. I know that we're wearing those like brand new all black uniforms. I forgot the names of them right now, but I know a lot of people get excited for that. For me at this point, I just want to see the team win. We're 0-3 obviously, but it's not just 0-3, but it's just like these little things that just keep happening and nobody seems to like find the solution, if that makes sense. So yeah, 0-3 playing the Jets. We'll ultimately see what happens. The Jets are most likely gonna have Tyrod Taylor, their backup quarterback, starting. He started this past Sunday against Tampa, and the Jets gave Tampa a hell of a fight. And to point out, Tampa is 3-0, but the Jets really showed a lot of promise. Their defense is still great. It looks like Aaron Glenn, he is a defensive-minded guy, that he hasn't firing on all cylinders, and ultimately they're playing with their backup quarterback right now, and they went toe-to-toe with one of the rare undefeated teams still left in the league right now. I believe they're 6. And speaking of Tampa, to cover them really quick, and their 3 wins so far, they've all been last-minute drives, game-winning drives like Baker Mayfield in the offense, and it's been absolutely incredible to see Emeka Egbuka, the rookie wideout for them out of Ohio State. He's been amazing. Mike Evans, he's had great moments as always. The Bucs legend, unfortunately, he just got a hamstring injury. He may miss a couple weeks. And they also have Chris Godwin, who hasn't played yet this season. We know the type of receiver he is. So, we're going to see going forward what happens with Tampa. They host Philadelphia, a battle of 2 3-0 teams. And last Sunday, the Rams actually almost beat Philadelphia. So it's going to be interesting to see Philadelphia at Tampa this Sunday. I believe it's at 4:25 p.m. So that should be a great game. I wanted to really highlight that game aside from my whole thoughts on the Dolphins, because I feel like that should be must watch for all NFL fans out there, Philadelphia at Tampa. But yeah, guys, gonna wrap up, the sports segment / NFL segment. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Fins up. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Flame Entertainment and Sports. Hope you guys enjoyed hearing my thoughts on episode 2 of Dancing with the Stars, as well as my thoughts on the Dolphins and what they've done so far this season. If you guys have any thoughts on any of these topics we covered today that you want to share and you're watching here on YouTube, make sure to comment down here below. Or you could also share your thoughts with us on social media at the flame_ES on Instagram and TikTok. Once again, please subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Share with a friend. And yeah, guys, with all that said, till next time, everyone, take care.